Did you know that in 1986, Transformers wasn't the only animated movie about robots that hit theaters? Apparently, there was another one starring a bunch of dudes called GoBots or something. Anyway, aside from both movies being based on toy lines featuring robots that converted into vehicles, each story also introduced a brand new alien race. The GoBots movie gave us Rock Lords, aliens that could transform into rocks. Yeah, as thrilling as that sounds, I guess it could have been worse. I mean, at least they were lords. And unlike the new Transformers characters, weren't pure trash. Now, unless you're a grouchy green dude who lives in a trash can, I think we can all agree that garbage is a universal problem. And to be more specific, what do you do with it once it's gotten too hard to handle? Here in the Philippines, we had one of the most infamous examples of this, a place ominously called Smoky Mountain. From the 1950s up to the 90s, Smoky Mountain wasn't just a massive landfill, it was a literal mountain of garbage, towering around 50 meters high, which is roughly the height of a 15-story building. It got its name from the smoke that constantly rose from the fires caused by decomposing waste. The mountain was so famous that it inspired a local pop group that sang about social issues and a professional wrestling tag team. But the unfortunate reality was that at its peak, Smoky Mountain was home to about 30,000 people who spent their days scavenging through the trash and building makeshift homes right on the heap. It was incredibly dangerous. Aside from the aforementioned fires, the people there had to deal with landslides and disease. Thankfully, in the mid-90s, the government shut it down, relocated the families, and began efforts to rehabilitate the site. Now, given that, can you picture something bigger than a mountain of trash? Like a whole planet? Well, that's what we got in the fictional universe of the Transformers, where Cybertron had its own trash problem. But instead of digging a hole and building their own cyber mountain of waste, they took the more sci-fi approach, just yeeting it. See, I can speak that kiddie lingo. Way into deep space through a space bridge. Out of sight and out of mind, am I right? Except after millions of years of just shooting their problems across the universe, all that intergalactic garbage, including busted up and discarded Cybertronians, eventually clumped together and became a whole planet. A planet literally made of junk, fittingly named Junk. And those toss-aside Cybertronians, they didn't just fade away, they came back as a whole new bunch of dudes, united under a new name, the Junkions. And ruling over this scrapyard society was their one-of-a-kind leader, the king of the hill, or at least the junk heap, the titty gun-wielding Wreck-Gar. Introduced as part of the third year of Transformers toys, Wreck-Gar definitely stood out at first glance in the 1986 catalog. He wasn't part of a subgroup like the Minibots or Tapes or Autobot cars, but on his own, a solitary character which kind of signaled to me that this guy was supposed to be a big deal. While his original toy was pretty much what you would expect from the Transformers of the 80s, he did visually differ in some ways, specifically being an extra lean bot with more than average articulation in the arms, which held up a pair of unusual close-quarter combat weapons of some sort. A 4-bladed axe and a shield made up of a wheel of his motorcycle alt mode. Yes, for the record, I do know that he came with a blaster rifle, but that wasn't pictured in the catalog. One more thing worth noting was that, like most of the new toys introduced that year, Wreck-Gar wasn't based on a pre-existing toy from Japan. Instead, it was based on concept art done by Filipino illustrator and Transformers design supervisor Floro Derry. Naturally, Derry's extremely detailed work had to be simplified when translated into plastic, and it's worth noting that his very unique Fu Manchu mustache was not carried over to his toy. Anyway, nothing in the catalog hinted at Wreck-Gar being from a separate garbage-themed race, let alone the leader. I mean, the fact that his name was actually a combination of the words wreck and garbage literally flew over my head. Wreck-Gar was just described as a fast and furious fighter, ready to race into battle. To get the bigger picture, you'd have to dig deeper, specifically into his tech spec, where we first learn about the Junkions, the dudes that Wreck-Gar rules over. Now, before we really get into the main junker himself, let's get more acquainted with the Junkions. As mentioned earlier, the Junkions are a collective race that originated from the parts and pieces of discarded Cybertronians. And given their physiology, one would think that the Junkions would be a bunch of pushovers. But it would be a mistake to underestimate them, as despite their scrappy and ragged and post-apocalyptic Mad Max-inspired appearance, the average Junkion is actually quite powerful. I mean, to survive in such a haphazard environment, you'd have to be, right? And their mix and match bodies are composed of so many non-essential components tacked on that it takes a significant amount of damage before an attacker can even find something vital to hit. Anyway, despite their resilient and formidable nature, in general the Junkions are not particularly violent. In fact, they are considered to be a rather cultured race. If not a little quirky, as their sort of hive mind personality is shaped from a collection of things that find their way to their planet from across the cosmos, including television and radio transmissions from Earth of all places, which the Junkions are particularly addicted to and which forms the basis and structure of much of their communication. And you thought Michael Bay was being original with his treatment of the radio-speaking bumblebee. But despite their generally good nature, Junkions have become somewhat territorial, since their home junk has become known as the world where you can find anything you want if you look hard enough. It is often beset by treasure hunters and thrill seekers, and many have tried to harm or take advantage of the Junkions along the way. Now, if the Junkion suspects the visitors may be up to no good, they'll immediately rally to drive them out, which would most likely explain why the Junkions acted the way they did when they made their official debut in the 1986 Transformers animated movie. So as the story goes, after being pursued by Galvatron and the Decepticons from Earth, an Autobot shuttle containing Ultra Magnus, Perceptor Springer, RC, Blur, and their human companion Daniel crash lands on the planet Junk, where they are given a warm welcome by the Junkions. In one of the most memorable action sequences of the movie, executed with the awesome Dare to Be Stupid by Weird Al Yankovic playing in the background. Sorry, I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent here, but yeah, I was a huge Weird Al fan back in 1986. Like, huge. I mean, I still am. The guy is pure genius. And if you don't get him, then I'm sorry. We can't be friends. Anyway, so Wreck-Gar, voiced by British actor and comedian Eric Idle of Monty Python fame, whom I also remember fondly as the oft-injured, blood-squirting bike rider from National Lampoon's European Vacation, leads his army of biker robots to take out the Autobots, who were just busy scrounging around for parts to repair their ship, as he boldly quips, "You check in, but you don't check out." And true to their scrappy nature, they prove to be quite the handful for the Autobots, as Springer so aptly puts it. It's not hard to knock them down, it's getting them to stay down that's the trick. Man, I remember being at awe just seeing so many Junkions sprout out of the garbage, losing limbs and just casually putting them back, and then watching one of them just getting knocked off his bike and then promptly transforming into a bike himself while his original bike transformed into a Junkion, switching places as they rode back into battle. And of course, who could forget that little one-on-one battle where Wreck-Gar nearly bested Springer in combat? I mean, granted he had home court advantage, had he not been cheap-shotted by Daniel from behind, abruptly ending the encounter with a big clang. Actually, it's the arrival of another alien ship bringing in more Autobots, Hot Rod, Cup, Wheelie, and the Dinobots, that causes everyone to stop where they are, and well, after a quick universal greeting of Ba Weep Grana Weep Nini Bong by Hot Rod, all is forgiven and the Junkions are instantly won over. And without skipping a beat, to show appreciation for their new friends, they promptly repair Ultra Magnus, who had been previously blown to bits by Scourge and the Sweeps right before the Junkion attack. Anyway, after more partying to some more Weird Al tunes, Wreck-Gar and the Junkions officially joined their new Autobot friends in taking on the main baddie in the story, the Grand Poobah himself, Unicron, on board their own battleship that emerges from the planet's surface, the Minnow, whose name was taken from the boat from the TV show Gilligan's Island that was caught in a storm at sea, marooning Gilligan and company on an uncharted isle. Unfortunately, in the final battle, while the minnow is tough enough to withstand a direct breath blast from Unicron, it eventually gets caught in the Chaos Bringer's grasp and crushed. But fortunately, Wreck-Gar and his resilient Junkions survive, all the way into the third season of the cartoon that took place after the movie. In the third season, Wreck-Gar spends most of his time on Junkion but is always brought into the forefront whenever needed to usually repair any damaged Autobots, as was the case when he revived Springer after he was grossly disassembled by a goop-sucking garbage machine. He was also tapped to try and revive Optimus Prime himself but was unfortunately unsuccessful. In the end though, it would take a quintesson of all things to bring back the OG Autobot commander. But speaking of those five-faced floating tentacle dudes, they would figure in what would most likely be Wreck-Gar and the Junkion's most memorable episode, the Big Broadcast of 2006. In the episode, a bunch of quintessons attempt to recover a lost journal which they track to the planet Junk, and after an unsuccessful attempt to initially recover the journal by using their Sharkticons, the quintessons resort to more devious methods. They hijack the Junkion's TV signals and brainwash them into cleaning up their trash, and in the process uncovering the journal. Unfortunately, the hijacked signals also corrupt the Junkions themselves, turning them hostile and untrusting of other races. And what's more, Wreck-Gar then boosts that signal to the rest of the galaxy, sparking chaos as other brainwashed alien races turn on each other. Like, seriously, Cat Planet takes off with their jets to invade Dog Planet. Poor pooches. Just crazy stuff. That being said, entertaining premise aside, the writers really need to give parents another reason to fear their children becoming mindless slaves to television. Anyway, this all culminates in one big free-for-all on the planet Junk between the Autobots, Decepticons, and Junkions, with the situation finally being resolved thanks to the Autobot communications specialist Blaster, who counters the violence-spreading broadcast with some easy listening tunes, quickly mellowing everybody out. One thing worth noting about this episode is that another special Junkion is introduced, and that would be Wreck-Gar's lady friend, a female Junkion who, while initially going nameless, was christened years later in Japan as Nancy, supposedly after the 40th US President Ronald Reagan's wife. Hey parents, just say no to drugs. See, the Transformers cartoons were good for something. Anyway, aside from being Wreck-Gar's consort, other interesting bits about this female Junkion is that 1, she actually has the ability to literally put herself back together after being blown up by blaster fire. And visually, her design is based off another short-lived alien race introduced in the '86 movie, the Lithonians, who along with their planet are devoured by Unicron in the movie opening, suggesting though a possible connection between the two races. And speaking of connections, how about staying connected to my channel? If you're enjoying this story, when you're done, why not check out another story? And another, and another? You get the point. I've got a whole bunch of stories about Wreck-Gar's 86 mates just ready for you to watch. So I hope you stick around. Hell, you can just keep me blabbing about in the background as you go about your day, as apparently extended viewing time is what really helps out channels like mine. Much more than liking, commenting, sharing, or subbing, although I'd really love all of those too. But as always, whichever way you choose to help will be greatly appreciated, so thank you. So when it came to the comics, like most of his fellow 86 mates, apart from a comic movie adaptation, Wreck-Gar didn't have much of a presence in the original Marvel series, which meant he was fair game for Simon Furman in the UK comics, where Wreck-Gar took part in some notable adventures, the first of which was when he was pulled in and joined Rodimus Prime and Company on a mission through time to stop Galvatron. Initially, Wreck-Gar is separated from the others, which proves to be fortunate for Bumblebee, whom Wreck-Gar discovers deactivated, an apparent victim of the bounty hunter Death's Head. Anyway, he rebuilds the fallen Autobot into Goldbug, so good job, Wreck-Gar. Upon his return from his time-traveling adventures though, Wreck-Gar discovers that his own peeps, the Junkions, had fallen under the control of Unicron, whose floating severed head apparently drifted all the way to the planet Junk and ended up enslaving the Junkions to do his bidding, i.e., convert their planet into a new body for the Chaos Bringer. Fortunately, Wreck-Gar is able to foil this plan by planting explosives beneath Unicron's remains and detonating them, as Rodimus Prime is able to contain Unicron's essence in the Matrix itself, ending the Chaos Bringer's threat for now. And finally, what would Wreck-Gar be without his favorite five-faced tentacle buddies, the Quintessons? At some point, Wreck-Gar comes into the possession of a Quintesson journal containing their plans to abandon Quintessa and colonize other mechanical worlds, including Cybertron. On his way to deliver this information to the Autobots, though, Wreck-Gar is captured and tortured by the Quintessons, who try and get him to divulge the location of the journal. But instead, he basically makes up a story retelling the events of the cartoon episode The Big Broadcast of 2006, which apparently, in this comics continuity, is complete and utter bullcaca. Still, it's a cool reuse of that episode's plot. Eventually, Wreck-Gar escapes being fed to the Sharkticons with the help of Wheelie, and with his Junkions, rigs the journal to broadcast its contents across the galaxy, basically exposing the Quintessons' schemes to countless worlds, turning them into one of the most hated and hunted races in the universe, and completely disrupting their future plans. And speaking of future plans, after the Transformers UK run ended, Wreck-Gar was fortunate, well, sort of, to be included in future Transformers comics and cartoon series plans. I say sort of because Wreck-Gar first made a short-lived return in the pages of the Dreamwave comics in the early 2000s. In this continuity, Wreck-Gar is an unwitting benefactor to Megatron when he discovers the near-dead Decepticon leader drifting in space. He brings him back online and even donates salvaged drones for his forces, only to be repaid with getting run through his chest and having his head blasted away. Poor Wreck-Gar. At least Dreamwave itself wasn't too long for this world either, as the company abruptly shut down and lost the Transformers publishing license to IDW, where Wreck-Gar lives again. Now, in IDW, let's just say the Junkions get off to a really rough start, as very early on, like towards the beginning of the Great War, Megatron is banished to the planet Junk and basically does what he does best: massacre a bunch of Junkions. Years after that, things went further downhill for the Junkions as their planet became a battleground between Autobot and Decepticon forces led by Prowl and Shockwave respectively, with the end result being the destruction of the entire planet, forcing Wreck-Gar and his peeps to escape aboard a corkscrew-shaped starship, becoming nomadic traders and scavengers. Oh well, at least in this continuity, Wreck-Gar gets a new partner, Rummage. So I guess you could say they would travel through space and rummage through all the wrecks and garbage for treasure. Anyway, in the present, the Junkions discover Earth's rich Ore-13 deposits and see them as the key to restoring their home. Upon arrival, they are welcomed by Optimus Prime, and after some negotiating hiccups, i.e. Rummage losing faith in Optimus Prime's sincerity and plotting to seize Earth by force using a horde of Sharkticons, and Wreck-Gar's body being blown to bits, leaving him as basically a talking head. The Junkions eventually make peace though and find a new home on Earth, resettling in the Bikini Atoll where they construct Little Cybertron. And in the ultimate IDW series-ending battle with the Chaos-Bringer Unicron, Wreck-Gar and Rummage, along with their Sharkticon horde, man, I just love saying that, help defend the Earth and even end up rescuing the US president from Unicron's Maximals. Now, while that covers Wreck-Gar's adventures in the comics, it's worth noting that another version of the Junkion leader showed up in the 2007 series Transformers Animated. While the initial plan was to bring back Eric Idle to voice him, this was unfortunately not possible due to scheduling conflicts. And so they brought in the next best thing: weird frickin' Al Yankovic, who in my unbiased opinion did a fantastic job at bringing this version of Wreck-Gar to life in his own unique and weird way. Animated Wreck-Gar was once again a good-natured, cheerful, but deeply confused robot, brought to life in the show by an Allspark shard and emerging from what else but a pile of garbage. Possessing no memory or sense of identity, he mimics what he sees and hears, often taking things literally. And upon seeing the Autobots in action, Wreck-Gar decides to become one, even affixing an Autobot logo to his chest. And despite getting initially duped by a supervillain Archer and some garbage dumping chaos and confusion, he ends up joining them in getting rid of a bunch of garbage-eating microbots, vacuuming them up into his garbage backpack, causing himself to overload, fall, and sink to the bottom of a lake. But don't worry, kiddies, Wreck-Gar survives, remaining trapped underwater with the fishes until his inevitable return in a later episode when he answers the call for a hero by the Autobot ally Sari Sumdak, who forms a team of substitute Autobots, which includes the Constructicon Scrapper and the Dinobot Snarl, in order to battle the Autobot A-Team, who have fallen under the control of the evil toy-turned-Decepticon Soundwave, whom Wreck-Gar takes on himself, countering the Decepticons' guitar riffs of doom with his accordion, Weird Al's preferred instrument of choice. Nice! Anyway, while he was basically a guest star in the show, he apparently did enough to earn him his own toy in the animated line, which was released in 2008. Granted, this is a sort of a departure from the traditional-looking Wreck-Gar given his ultra-stylized animated aesthetic and the fact that he transformed into a garbage truck rather than his usual motorcycle alt mode. That being said, aside from being a cool toy, it's significant as it is the first ever modern toy of Wreck-Gar to be released since the original. But if you're a stickler for the original recipe Wreck-Gar, you would have to wait a few years later for the Reveal the Shield line. Now, despite transforming once again into a motorcycle, this dude was still a pretty stylized version of the Junkion that featured a pretty ingenious non-symmetrical look to him, making him really looking like he was made out of scraps and parts. But what was really the cherry on top of this toy was that he could actually ride on himself. I mean, if you got two Wreck-Gars, that is, like I and most probably every other Transformer collector did, you could keep one of them in motorcycle mode for your second Wreck-Gar to ride. 2016 and 2018 gave us two more rather ho-hum versions of Wreck-Gar as part of the Combiner Wars and Power of the Prime sublines. These were basically retools of the Protectobot motorcycle Groove, so nothing much to talk about here. Moving on. Finally, in 2021, we got what most consider to be the definitive modern Wreck-Gar from the Studio Series 86 line, which, as per the line's name, is supposed to be the most cartoon-accurate version of Wreck-Gar from the movie. And it's not bad, even having the same ride-on-himself gimmick from the Reveal the Shield version, although I still feel the prior one did it better. And speaking of doing it better, as good as a job as the Studio Series 86 version did at giving us a toon-accurate Wreck-Gar, if you really want a Wreck-Gar that looked like he literally stepped out of the movie screen, Super 7 gave us their ultimate take on the Junkion leader in 2023. Unfortunately, the trade-off for such screen accuracy was that this was basically a decently articulated action figure that couldn't transform. But he came with a good number of accessories and switch-out parts, including an alternate clean-shaven toy head that I guess you could pass off as a random Junkion. Speaking of which, let's take a quick detour, as while for the longest time Wreck-Gar was pretty much the only Junkion available in plastic form, it was inevitable that Hasbro would use their favorite methods of making a quick buck, repainting and retooling, to give us the Junkion Detritus in 2004, who was basically a rather unspectacular beige repaint of the Autobot Hound. Anyway, rather bland appearance aside, Detritus is best known for his questionable loyalties, ranging from plotting to build his own army and overthrow Wreck-Gar as the leader of the Junkions, to being Wreck-Gar's personal valet, literally carrying the Junkion leader's detached head around via a chain looped around his neck like an amulet, enabling the literal head of state to welcome visitors to Little Cybertron in the IDW comics. Years later, more run-of-the-mill Junkions would get love from retooled versions of the Reveal the Shield and Studio Series 86 toys, with plastic versions of Scrap Heap and Junk Heap being released in 2011 and in the 2020s. But I would say that Hasbro really kicked the door open on official Junkion toy goodness with their Legacy line in 2023 by releasing a bunch of newer Junkions that had a pretty unique Evo Fusion play pattern. Aside from them transforming into their alt modes that now included junker cars and garbage trucks aside from motorcycles, Scrap Hook, Crash Bar, Axle Grease, and Trash Master could be broken up into their individual body parts and be rebuilt into different configurations limited only by as far as your imagination and those 5mm ports and pegs will take you. And we will be getting a couple more later this year or early next with Jalopy and a new Wreck-Gar, this one heavily inspired by his animated version, joining in on the fun. Unfortunately though, when it comes to the masterpiece realm, Takara Tomy is apparently not as fun, as we have yet to receive an official masterpiece toy of Wreck-Gar from them. But fortunately, the third-party company KFC came to the rescue with their own take called Crash Hog. This guy was a random just checking off a character box purchase for me during a trip to Singapore in 2015. And I came this close to passing on him just because in package he was missing one of his titty guns. And the store owner couldn't confirm if it had just fallen inside the box somewhere. Anyway, I took a chance, and I'm infinitely glad that I did, as aside from his missing titty gun being in the box, Crash Hog turned out to be quite the solid masterpiece representation of Wreck-Gar that has held up pretty well through the years. Well, aside from the fact that my Crash Hog's mustache kinda disintegrated, but all that aside, more significant to note is that this dude is the only masterpiece representation of Wreck-Gar we would have available to us up to this day. Although surprisingly, he's not the only masterpiece Junkion on the scene. Sensing a collection void left unfilled, KFC went all into the Junkion retool well, giving us Sanford, Stodgy, Smithereen, Waystar Delta, Debris, Gunker, Scraps, Castoff, Dregs, and Dumpyard. Phew, did I miss anybody? Oh yeah, if you're a fan of the GoBots, KFC has got your back. Or is that your toe? Hello, toe cutter. And speaking of hellos, have you said hello to this kitty? No, sorry, I meant this kitty. If you want to know more about the cool Decepticat Ravage, who apparently talked in a classy Russian accent, you can check out his story here. Or if you want to see my latest episode, you can check it out over here. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope to hear from you in the comments below. Go ahead, tell me your story.